Hi, everyone. I am so honored to introduce Cynthia Abizaid-Rush. Cynthia is an engaging, inspirational speaker and transformational life coach. She shares stories straight from the intimate pages of her own life, growing stronger and more resilient with each victory scar she earns. She is a dynamic and vibrant multilingual entrepreneur, speaks Arabic, Spanish, French, English, and yes, gibberish, and has the unique gift of connecting with and relating to multicultural and religiously diverse human beings all around the world. Cynthia grew up on two continents. She was born and raised in Beirut, Lebanon, by her Lebanese Mexican father and American mother. And at the young age of 15, as turmoil grew in Lebanon and throughout the Middle East, moved to the United States for a safer life. In 1973, Cynthia was accepted to Emma Willard School, a prestigious all-girls private college prep high school in upstate New York, and a few years later became a proud naturalized American citizen. In 1980, she graduated from Wittenberg University in Springfield, Ohio, with a BA in elementary education and vocal performance. Whether sharing memories of 40 years as a healthcare and patient advocate, business owner, EA to C-class executive, certified diamond appraiser, elementary school educator, and singer-songwriter, or the 3 decades in which she not only survived, but thrived through civil war, domestic violence, and opiate dependency, one can't help but to be moved and ignited with hope, courage, and appreciation as Cynthia transparently shares her very real life stories with boldness and grace, stories to which so many of us can privately relate. Always mindful of her vulnerabilities, Cynthia continues to walk in faith, overcoming the very real storms in her life, and by doing so, discovering the greatest gift, who she has become in the process. Her current focus is finishing her first book, in which she intimately shares her 16-year journey of opiate dependency as a standard patient and provides tools and resources to help others circumvent the black hole of transition from inpatient to outpatient pain management. Through focused rigor and dedication in her belief that what we walk through is always greater than us, Cynthia stands alongside her clients and audiences, guiding them as they begin to discover that all they've ever needed is already within them, and that what is within them is so much greater than any of their circumstances. Please give a warm Zoom welcome to Cindy Rush, class of 76.
Well, it was the summer of 1973, and I was 15 years old. I was born in Beirut, Lebanon, and the Civil War was raging. My 3 younger sisters and I had been sent to the United States by our parents to live a safer life and to regain our American citizenship. And although we had a grounding source in our Grandma Jane, who lived in Poughkeepsie, New York, we went from living with our parents and our younger siblings in the only country we knew, to new lives in the United States, feeling alone, homesick, and absolutely terrified. My dorm room actually had a small window which overlooked the well-manicured lawns. Surrounded by that Gothic architecture at Emma Willard, I didn't realize how beautiful it all was until many months later. But Emma Willard would become my refuge and my safe haven. The fighting was fierce back home and so close to where we lived. Communication was sporadic, and with no cell phones, texting, Snapchat, Facebook, I was limited to telegrams and a payphone. I'd wake up each morning wondering if our home had been destroyed and whether our family was still alive. I used to run to what used to be called the two-way market down on Pauling Avenue to pick up the New York Times newspaper. There was usually a front page article about the war in Lebanon, and I cut them out each day, and I put them in what turned out to be 3 overflowing scrapbooks that I still have today. Many times it would be my only connection to home. At the end of my corridor hung a phone with a long, curly, tangled up cord. And late each night, I'd sit on the floor underneath it, waiting for it to ring. Inevitably, a door would crack open from one of the rooms and a face would pop out to see if I was sitting there. And I usually was, alone, with a blanket in tow and sometimes a soft pillow on which to sit. One of my many new dorm sisters would sit with me. We didn't know each other very well at all, but they kept me warm, sometimes in silence. Sometimes they spoke a word or two, but it didn't really matter. Somebody always sat with me every night. I had a class with Mr. Betterly in Slocum Hall, and I settled in at my desk one morning, and as I waited for class to begin, I heard a sound that threw me into an absolute tailspin. The sirens had sounded. The voices of people screaming, sound barriers broken by the sonic boom of the flying jets, and all I knew to do was to get down fast, way down. Under my desk, my body rolled up in a ball, my head down and my hands on my head just like this. It really was a matter of life and death. I turned my head slightly to check if my classmates were okay, but everybody was still sitting in their seats as if nothing had happened. I started to yell at them to get down under their desks, to cover their heads. What were they thinking? But no one moved and no one said a word until one girl who lived on my floor and sat with me one night waiting for that phone to ring, stood up and started walking towards me. The room was still. I began to shake, to cry, fearful that she'd be hurt or killed coming towards me, but she just kept walking. She knelt down beside me and she said, "Cindy, you're safe here. You can come out from under your desk." No, I couldn't. "What are you doing standing here?" I remember telling her, and I begged her to get down with me. And she looked at me and she said, "Cindy, you are safe with me, with us in our school. That siren you heard, it wasn't an air raid siren, and you're not in Beirut anymore. There are no planes and no bombs. There's no fighting here. That siren came from the fire department that the city of Troy sounds every day at noon." Oh my gosh, I was so mortified. I was so embarrassed. I couldn't believe the sound of the siren had triggered such a drastic reaction in me. I stood motionless in the classroom, and a familiar feeling of fight or flight just consumed me. I wanted to run out of there so fast. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't imagine facing anyone. Over the next few months, I began to notice what I was noticing as the sirens sounded every day. And I realized that the paradigm I had lived for so long was one that had to change. So I asked myself what step I could take with what I had and with where I was in that moment to move forward in the service of my new life at Emma Willard and in the United States. And that step was in a new word I learned that day, and that word is resilience. Resilience is defined as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, the process of adapting well, not with a contractive mindset, but with an expansive mindset in the face of adversity. And yes, that means walking in faith, not in fear. What I was reminded of in that moment was that despite everything I'd gone through in my life, there had always been a gift in my storm. And the gift in my storm that morning was that so much more than surviving in that moment. It was who I was becoming and had become in the process. And over the next 3 years, Emma Willard would play a pivotal role in my transformation. It was a safe place for me to discover what it meant to be my best self. And my best self came from becoming resilient. From what I've heard, resilience has been a gift in your storm this year. You showed up today despite your adversities. You woke up breathing, and you have to remember that's a gift. You know why? Because we can't control our breathing. We can't control our heartbeats. So when we wake up and we fog up a mirror, we are in a good place. So don't ever forget that. You're committed to your education, your relationships, and your friendships. And Emma Willard's vision was as clear in 1973 as it is today. that through the moments of discovery, of struggle and failure, success and connection, you develop a belief in yourself and an awareness of transformative power of impassioned engagement within your world. The choices you make are always bigger than you and I. In the fall of my senior year, my dear friend Katie Reed asked me if a poem my father had written, to which I put to music, could be our senior class song. I used to play it on my guitar over and over again when I was homesick. And I guess many of my classmates had learned it and eventually would sing along with me. The song was titled "To My Daughters in Their Teens." Of course, Katie, I was so excited. I'm going to make sure that my dad is here in the front row to hear us sing it. My excitement, however, quickly turned to sadness as I realized that it would be virtually impossible for him to escape from Beirut. You know, war is strange. Sometimes it's all fighting, and other days all you hear are the songs of the minarets blending in the skies with the sounds of church bells. Well, it was on a sound of church bells morning that the Beirut airport just happened to open briefly, and my parents were able to slip out onto a flight for New York. It would be the last flight for a very long time. My parents were escorted to the front row in Kagan's auditorium, where just a few months earlier, I'd played a lord in Rebels. My father always wore a tie, and in the haste of leaving Lebanon, he forgot to bring them. As we began to sing, I saw him lean over to the dad next to him and found out that he'd asked to borrow his tie. He slipped it over his head, and I noticed that he'd begun to weep as he watched 90 of his daughters in their teens sing the song that he'd written for his daughters just 2 years earlier. You see, despite the war, the gunfire, the curfews, the blackouts, the sounds of tanks rolling through our neighborhoods, my father still had wishes, hopes, and dreams for his daughters, for all of his daughters, just like you. And when the song was over, he stood, he straightened that tie, he faced our class, so moved that he couldn't speak, and he put his hands together and he gently bowed his head with thanks. That was a bigger than us moment that women like you at Emma Willard gave to a man who, in the midst of so much adversity, in that moment felt so loved and cherished. That day he gained 90 more daughters, and it was a time that he carried in his heart for the rest of his life. You've chosen to live a life of intention, of empowerment, and with that privilege of choice comes responsibility. The gift in your storm is based on the choices you make, a choice of who you decide to become in the process of living a purposeful life, a bigger than you life, because the choices you make do impact others. And if there's one thing you take away from this today, it is this: your power, your point of power is within you. It always has been, and it always will be. And what is within you is greater than any of your circumstances. Whether it's a civil war in 1973 or COVID-19 in 2020, remember who you are in the journey of resilience. And as my father wrote in his poem, reach high, touch the sky, and let your dreams come true, because the biggest adventure you can ever take is to live the life of your dreams. Ms. Rao, Dr. Legg, and Ms. Marr, thank you for the gift of inviting me to share a little peek out of my window this morning. Just like Emma Willard, who opened the doors of her home to girls seeking a rich educational experience, through your unwavering passion, rigor, and dedication to her legacy, and to the young women on our call this morning, you each continue to open doors, expand minds, and foster a love of learning by sharing your world in powerful and, yes, in resilient ways, despite the adversities you have faced this year. You are truly the gifts in their storms each day and will be a lasting gift in mine. Thank you so much for allowing me to share. Shukran, merci, dankeschön, to the genki the goo.